And we have the first keynote session which is coming up. Sorry, first track session which is coming up for all of us, which is from Arul and Chaitanya. It is going to be the lab session for all of us. The topic on which they are going to conduct the lab session today is Cognizant Experience Lab, continuous testing with Azure DevOps. So as to introduce Arul and Chaitanya, Arul has tremendous 17 years of experience in software quality engineering and assurance industry. He's an AWS solution architect, professional certified technology leader who can architect innovative cloud solutions for the customer challenges. And he looks after the engineering, especially the cloud engineering specific initiatives in Cognizant. Whereas Chaitanya also has significant 16 plus years of experience in software testing and quality assurance. And then he also handles end-to-end delivery of mobile and cloud migration related strategic projects in Cognizant. They both are currently associated with Cognizant. And yeah, we are looking forward to do some hands-on with this lab session with both of you today. So with this, I think welcome both of you once again, and then I would like to hand it over to both of you so that you two can take the control, and then we will get started.
Thank you, Patil. Chaitanya, you want to share the screen?
Yeah, it's visible. Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Chaitanya. So, yeah, so today both myself and Chaitanya will be running this experience lab for you. A small correction is that we will do it, and I mean we'll do a typical fully hands-on based exercise, and you can actually see a demo. I mean you can watch it and ask questions. So that's how this today's 1.5 hour session is going to be. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah. So first, I will probably give a context why continuous testing and why Azure DevOps for continuous testing, and also set the premise for the experience lab that we have built using Azure, using a sample application, right? And then once that is done, Chaitanya will do the complete hands-on of how to build a continuous testing plan for the sample application in Azure DevOps. And then finally, we can also have a Q&A for 15 minutes. Okay, so that's the context. Let me move on. So what we have also done, part of this experience lab. So this is a Cognizant exclusive event that we do for our customers and our associates as well. Okay, so that's what we are sharing it today. So what we have done is we have built a playbook. Okay, so this playbook is available over the internet. And the playbook talks about the complete step-by-step instruction that is required to actually perform the experience lab. Okay, I will go a little bit more detail about it as I get started. So only thing I just want to highlight is, as I said, this is purely for Cognizant customers and employees, but we are also opening it up so that we can do a show and tell to you guys on how to the industry, right? So on how we can do these things. Okay. So today I am going to talk about continuous testing and why Azure, right? And before I get started, I would like to give you a background on how traditional testing works in software development lifecycle. Okay, I assume this is a testing crowd, but there could be people who are from cloud or a non-testing background. So I'll just probably take a minute to talk about how traditional testing works in the software development lifecycle. So traditionally, testing comes as the last phase of the SDLC process, right? It is mostly manual and consumes a lot of time, right? We all know that. Many of us who are in this background will know that. And these are also silo, right? We work in silos between developers, testers, and business analysts. We all understand the application requirements very differently. and we interpret it very differently, and then it often impacts the quality, cost, and timeline of the projects. This is a standard problem across the industry, right? So fast forwarding in today's world of agile and DevOps, this is no longer a luxury, right? QA organizations need to reimagine ourselves to stay relevant and collaborate closely with the businesses and development teams. QA teams need to find defects early and quickly. That means quality at speed. And that is precisely what continuous testing is going to help us to achieve. It is a DevOps aligned QA practice that demands higher levels of automation, like automating the test environments, test scenarios, test data, infusing AI in the testing processes, and virtualizing the dependent applications. Today, continuous testing is a de facto methodology across all types of testing, from smoke, functional, regression, and performance. For any organization transforming their traditional QA practices into continuous testing, Cognizant recommends 5 core practices for setting up continuous testing processes. Set up a centralized automation code repository with the right branching strategy. Set up an orchestration and artifacts management process, right? And refactor your existing automation assets for CI process. Set up a distributed remote execution nodes, and finally integrate the test results back to the test management tools. So based on your organization's DevOps maturity, you can further focus on additional 5 elements like test infra as a code, leveraging cloud native DevOps platforms like Azure, set up NFT pipelines and continuous deployment releases and processes, and finally use of AI and analytics in your CI/CD process. The idea behind this experience lab is also to demonstrate some of these elements in action today. So now that we discussed why continuous testing, the follow-up question should be why Azure, right? There are AWS, there are GCP, there are other cloud providers. Why Azure? So Microsoft, being a software company for Chaitanya, can you go to the next page? Why Azure? Yeah. So Microsoft, being a software company for nearly half a century, QA is not new for them. Azure has market leading capabilities like Azure Repos, Azure Test Plans, Azure Pipelines, Azure Artifacts, Azure Boards, etc. And recently, Microsoft extended their capabilities into GitHub, which is the largest developer community in the world. Continuous testing needs infrastructure to host test environments, distribute test execution nodes, which can be seamlessly provisioned and auto-scaled through automation using Azure Kubernetes services and Azure Container Services. Last but not least, Azure's ability to seamlessly integrate various leading open source and commercial testing tools into the Azure tech stack is a huge plus to choose Azure for your continuous testing needs. Now let's get into the premise and understand how the experience lab is structured for you today. The lab is split into 6 stages. As you see, these are logical steps in the continuous testing pipeline. For example, stage 0 focuses on creating the landing zone, which means creating the Azure infrastructure, deploying the application services, and provisioning Azure DevOps assets. Stage 1 to 5 focuses on various types of testing activities like static code analysis, deployment into QA environments, build verification tests, functional tests, and non-functional tests. You will see each of these stages in detail. At every stage, there are interesting things like solve and learn, where we have induced failures in the test so that we can show you how we can play around the fixes and re-trigger the pipeline. Similarly, we have also curated a lot of thought leadership materials and best practices from Cognizant, which are part of this TIC. TIC will be your learning assistant throughout the lab and help you enrich your understanding of continuous testing. Now let's get into the application overview. For this lab, we have used a sample e-commerce application called Digital Shopify. It is a responsive web design based application. It has features like registration, product catalog, cart, checkout, etc. Right? The tech stack of the application is also published at the bottom of the page. Now let's get into continuous testing solution architecture overview. Yeah, if you can zoom that. Yeah, thank you, Chaitanya. So the diagram represents the full solution at a very high level. You will be using Azure CLI to run the commands during the experience lab. You can also see we have used Azure cloud services like Azure Repos for source code management, Azure Pipeline for orchestration management, Docker and Kubernetes services for execution nodes, and a bunch of open source tools like Selenium, Sonar, JUnit, Rest Assure, JMeter for test automation, and also use Azure Dashboard, Azure Test Plans for reporting purposes. As a best practice, we have fully automated the entire setup using techniques like infrastructure as a code, DevOps pipeline as a code, and test automation. All you need to do is watch some of these commands that we execute and understand what is happening behind the scenes. Right? Finally, your key takeaway from this session will be a good understanding of how continuous testing works in the context of Azure. A lot of possibilities when it comes to seamless integration with the non-Microsoft testing tools and programming languages. And this will help you to modernize and scale your testing to the next level of maturity. With this background, I'll hand it over to Chaitanya to take you through the landing zone setup. Over to you, Chaitanya.
Yeah, thank you, Arul. Hello all. Welcome to this session. So today we will start with the landing zone. So let us understand what is a landing zone. With respect to a project, whether it is a cloud migration project where the applications are getting migrated from data center to cloud, or even if it is a greenfield application development, there should be a foundation to be set. There should be some best practices to be followed, which can be applied across a particular organization. So what are those best practices? Those best practices are in terms of the infrastructure, what security policies needs to be applied, who should give the access, what will be the ports open. So all those aspects are considered under landing zone. It is like a framework to be set up, and those are generally followed by the DevOps or the development team who will be actually working on creating of a infrastructure. This infrastructure the landing zone is structured in such a way so that it cannot be hacked, it cannot be it is most likely to be deployed in the production. So it is more of a production ready framework. What happens is in a landing zone, the preferences are given to the compute storage, networking part, storage and data. Where it comes to your governance element, where cost, policy, monitoring, identity is nothing but the access to the people. So all these different parameters are considered when it comes to the landing zone. So let's do one thing. We will start with our step first with the landing zone. So for that, we will switch to the portal. So there are two portals. One is the portal.azure.com and second is the dev.azure.com. So why these two portals? Basically, Microsoft gives you two elements. One is the Microsoft Azure portal, which is portal.azure.com. This is where the actual infrastructure is managed. So today we will be focusing on these two portals, where one is your infrastructure to be stood up from the portal.azure, and secondly the project dev.azure.com is more towards the your project management aspect, starting from your work items to be created for the development or testing, tracking them to the closure, having your test cases, test plans, everything we will look into dev.azure.com. So for this session, we had a couple of prerequisite, like whenever we take this to the customer, we tell the customer to have a subscribed account for Azure, set up few prerequisite like creating an organization, then enabling the test plan, create a personal access token. So all this prerequisite we generally tell customer to be filled and share it with us through this particular form. Once this form is filled, we will give you the access, and which then you can follow the steps in the playbook. Now coming to the first step in the creating your landing zone, it says that we should go first to portal.azure.com. Here is the Azure CLI. So there are two ways in which, if you look at the cloud, one is you can stood up the infrastructure from the UI part, or it also gives you provision like a command line where you can fire the commands and you can stood up the infrastructure as well. So now coming to the first step of the playbook, what I've done is I've gone through the portal.azure.com. Since I've already accessed this command line integration earlier, so this pop-up was not shown to me, and then this command line gets launched. After that, what we need to do is we need to copy this commands and store it. I've already created, in interest of time, I've already created a personal access token. I've already created an organization, which was mentioned in the prerequisite. And third thing is the test plan, which is already enabled. So let's get started. So first is I've created this organization called as Experience December Lab. Okay, so we will be working throughout this session in this Experience December Lab. So now first is I will set up my organization and personal access token. So this is the personal access token which we store here so that we can access it from command line, the portal. Now coming back is the personal access token for the access purpose. And then if you look at the next step was to git clone the URL. Okay, so we will be cloning this URL. Okay, and then the landing zone gets started. This will take some time. It will take around 10 to 12 minutes. I will explain in there meanwhile that what is happening in the background. So what we have done is to make this session seamless and people can relate like what happens actually in cloud. Secondly, also get familiar to Azure cloud. In to do this two aspect, we have combined everything into infrastructure as a code. So basically all these commands which I'm firing right now in the backend, this is like the infrastructure as code has been used so that the infrastructure which is required for this particular lab session is getting deployed. Now, if you look at it, there is already a progress which has been made. So in the background, there are resource groups which are being created for this experience lab. Secondly, a project will be created. Now, if you look at it, I'll refresh the Experience December lab and there is a project which is already created. So these are the steps which is actually working in the background and where we are using the infrastructure as a code. Secondly, to spin up the infrastructure, Azure provides ARM templates to spin up the infrastructure. If I need a virtual machine, I will use the ARM templates available, fill up the required details about the virtual machine, what memory I need the virtual machine, what type of virtual machine, which region I need to spin up. So all those things have been bundled into the ARM templates and we are running it in the background. So the project is created. We have the service token created for the access. The empty repositories has been created. Azure Container Registry, cluster, all these things we are using in background to, or maybe I will rephrase it to say we are leveraging the Azure native services so that we can demonstrate this continuous testing pipeline in Azure. So let us go step by step, like what all things or how there is another way in which you can look at this. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so I will just open another image for portal.azure.com so that I can show how the other infrastructure is being getting spin up in the background. So for example, the AKS cluster, blob storage, your self-hosted agent for automation execution. Then this is work items created in the Azure project management. Okay, so we'll go to portal.azure.com, and if you go to the proper subscription, and you should be able to see the different resources available under resources group. Okay, so in this resources you should be able to see all the resources which has been there for the experience lab session. Okay, now quickly we will come back to dev.azure.com. So all the aspects over here which has been shown, I will just quickly give you an overview about the Azure Dev azuredev.com. Okay, so once I select this project, you can see the project management aspect which I was mentioning earlier, right? So you get a summary view. Okay, you can see the stats, you can add a dashboard. Then you have the dashboard which we will be using throughout this session. We have created some shortcuts to make it easily accessible throughout the team. So you can have a multiple shortcuts or dashboards created here, and that can be leveraged for the project. Still, things are getting updated, so that is the reason you're just able to see the placeholder, because this is first step in the stage where we are just creating the placeholders and then filling up the details. Then we have the boards section. Wiki is nothing but to give some information about your project which you are working on, that you can maintain over here under wiki website. Then secondly, boards is nothing but like your Jira or Confluence which you are using. So one advantage or one differentiation which Azure DevOps bring is that it gives everything which is required for a project management under Azure DevOps. So for example, Jira is used for your tracking your user stories, whether you're following Agile methodology or Scrum methodology. All those can be done through your project settings. You can set up a project with Agile waterfall or iteration model. Those things can be set up, and accordingly you can set up the requirements in this work item. So for example, for this demonstration purpose, we have created sample user stories for which we have built this experience lab. So logging to eShop or application, then writing the test cases for text accessibility, the product information, order product, eShop, post registration, get all products. So all this information you can see it. So again, the work items related to your testing, accessibility, security, performance, experience, all those information are present. Now this is about the work items. You can plan those work items, all these work items into sprints, which you can manage through boards. It is taking a little bit time. Sorry, there is little bit of a latency at my end. Okay, fine. So it is coming now. So we have this Azure boards. So this Azure boards, you can work on this, whether the user stories are new, approved, committed, done. So those things can be arranged. You have the backlogs, the feature backlogs, which sprint, which work item you are planning to work. So all those information can be achieved. This can be arranged in various sprints as well. One second, changing the net connection. Give me a moment. Okay, sorry, you're able to hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, Chaitanya, we are able to hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so this is the backlogs. Then we have the sprint wise planning, which can be performed in which sprint, which work items or product you plan to create can be used and or leveraged in detail. You can fire some queries for reporting purpose. Azure has now also introduced a delivery plan as well, which is like mostly like your project plan, where you can set up the plan for your key milestone, whether it is your test cases or your development. Those plans can be set up from your new plan. Secondly, you have this repos, so where all these repositories can be maintained by the developer or our testing team. You can maintain your automation scripts, everything is over here. Then it follows the same principle of a Git. You can have commit, you can have push, you can have branches. So all those best practices which is required for a repository, those can be followed or can be utilized under repositories. Coming to the pipeline, it is more of your CI/CD pipeline. So if you're familiar with Jenkins or so, it can be used as an orchestration. So Azure Pipelines helps you to create a continuous testing pipeline. Today we will be looking it into a detail as well. Test plans. So this is like your quality center or ALM, where you can create different test suites, test cases, maintain them. So for example, in today's session, we have categorized our test into UI test, API test, your responsive web test, smoke, performance, security, and accessibility test. So all your scripts artifacts can be maintained under test plan. Okay, so now let's go back to see. Okay. So this all artifacts, everything is being created. Now we will quickly go to the next stage, that is the pre-built QA. I hope the earlier. So, okay, fine. So one section which is to be looked at is the TikTok, which helps into best practices. So in the TikTok session, it's talk about the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework. So this is the framework which has been given by Microsoft, and the all the principles which we spoke about in the landing zone. So this framework is created based on those principles. So whether it is the subscription, whether it is the policy of the access, single control management, or application centric, all those things has been maintained here. One can take this framework. This framework has been well proven. It is an established one and continuously evolving as well. So one can pick up this framework, customize it based on the organization need, and can be leveraged. Now we will move to the next stage, that is the pre-built QA. In pre-built QA, before the objective is basically to perform the testing. So what we are actually showcasing in this session is how we can put different quality gates at each of these stages in the life cycle. That helps us to reduce the number of defects being identified at the later stage, and which may impact the cost, which may impact the timeline to be delayed. Okay, so this quality gates or the should be introduced as a part of your project. So in this stage objective, this is the pre-built quality gate, where we what we are saying is we should perform the static code analysis. There are various tools which are available in the market. So in this session, we are using SonarQube for static code analysis. Unit testing to be done by the developers. Code coverage analysis, again, we are using static code SonarQube to perform the code coverage. The benefit of this is the defects as will get identified early. And basically you'll be able to see and identify if there are code issues. The developer can identify the code issues and can remove if there are any redundant or duplicate code. So what I will do is now I will run the command to trigger the pre-built QA pipeline. So with this, I will go to my dashboard and I will click on the command, and the pre-built QA pipeline will get started. In this pre-built QA pipeline, uh, so basically the code, once the code is written, okay, sorry about it. Okay. So in the pipeline, okay, so we have triggered the state, and now what is happening, what is going to happen? So developer will checking the code into Azure repos. There will be agent which will push this code, the front end and back end code. Okay, and we will perform the static code analysis and coverage using the Sonar Cube. So as a part of the landing zone, when we had set up the Sonar Cube as well. Then we have unit test coverage, the test coverage which has been written by the developer. So over here we have used jest and JUnit to perform the unit testing. Similarly, Sonar here to perform the coverage test. So once this test is done, the application will be built, the Dockerized image will be built, pushed to ACR, then deployed into Azure Kubernetes services, and then we will perform a build verification test. At the same time, when this static code and unit test are getting performed, we will be also updating the test plan. We are storing the results into blob storage, and the dashboard will get published. So now, since we have already triggered this command, let us see what stage we are in. Okay, fine. So I think there is an error. Give me a moment. We will rerun the um, okay. Okay. So meanwhile, till I again execute this command, what we will do is we will go through this playbook. So till we catch up on the actual exercise. Uh, in the pipeline creation and section, if you look at it, these commands, as we already know, we are triggering the commands that will help us to create the pipeline into Azure dev.azure.com, and this pre-built QA gets triggered. In this, what happens is we have introduced different stages where we have front end and back end. So front end is your UI related, and back end is your basically the database related activities. In the front end, once the code is ready, we will perform, there are various stages in it, like static code analysis for your code written. Once that code is validated, it will be pushed into ACR, which we have seen. Deploy it with the virtual services and verify with the build verification whether the build is proper or no. Now, looking at the so what we have done in this is we have introduced a defect just to make you relate like what happens exactly during the SDLC, right? There will be definitely defects which will get identified using the static code analysis. There will be some vulnerabilities which will get identified, some jar files which are the third-party libraries or open source libraries which has been used. Those might be outdated, and there might be some new libraries which need to be used. Some jar files which has been used may contain some malicious code as well. So all those things will get identified during your pre-built QA. And once that pre-built QA will come, there is a defect which we have introduced, and the pipeline gets failed. So this shows that if a pipeline is failed, your stages will not get progress. So we need to wait first to fix the defect, and once the pre-built QA is passed, then only the code will be deployed into test environment. Now, since we have introduced a defect, what we have done is we have also created a debug and re-execution section, so that you can actually identify the follow these steps and identify where the failure is. Now, for the failure purpose, what we have done is we have created a dashboard which can help you. Maybe in interest of time, I have okay. I'm opening an old repository for now to showcase how things will look like. Okay. Okay, so in interest of time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out the old repository to showcase you all these features, how it will look like when we run the pipeline. So the dashboard features, I'll go one by one now. So dashboard features. So as I was explaining, we had the dashboard created. So this dashboard is like more of your reporting tool. So for any leadership team, any or a scrum master, a report can be pulled here. So the report can be based on your how many user stories are there, how many it is getting in progress, to do. All those information can be added. You can create and customize these reports as well. Similarly, if there are any defects identified, all those defects can be shown in the chart as well. Similarly, the burn down chart, which is an important factor for the Scrum Master for planning. So that can be also pulled from this dashboard. Okay, so these are the various types of report which you can look at it. Secondly, we have this experience lab dashboard which we had created, which we will be using as we progress in creation of the pipeline, where the different tools which I spoke about, the Sonar Cube, where the Sonar Cube is hosted and it does the scan of your front end and back end. Then those reports, how it looks like, how to access it. Selenium Grid for your parallel execution, how Selenium Grid the execution is or the scripts can be executed using Selenium Grid. App Insight for your performance tool and the application monitoring, how the reports look like. So all these are some of the shortcuts which we have created for the easy navigation. Okay, coming back to the pre-built stage. So the pipeline. So the pipeline part, this is how the pipeline will look like. So in the first pipeline, so this is the pre-built QA pipeline which we were supposed to trigger, and this is how the successful pipeline looks like. So once you fix the error, the different stages which are present, those are displayed. And if you look at it, the pre-built QA front end is passed. Then it is once the test is passed, you can see that the code has been pushed to Azure ACR, that is Azure Container Registry. We deploy it, the application using the virtual services, and then perform the build verification. Similarly for the backend. Um, 1 second, let me see where we are with the deletion part. Apparently this is like a step by step we are building. So if any of the step builds, especially the initial stages like landing zone, then you are not able to proceed with further in the life cycle. So that is where what I'm trying to do is now removing the older code so that we can have a fresh start, and then I can continue explaining the details. Meanwhile, okay, so this is the pre-built QA section. We will fix the issue, the unit test which has been failed here, okay, during the session. And once we identify the root cause, we will go to this shortcut where we have mentioned where the fix needs to be applied. We will click on this link, and then this is the report which I was saying, how the unit test report will look like. And to come to the fixture part, we will come to the test results. Sorry. Okay, and basically there are multiple ways in which you can navigate to the code. So from the test result also you can navigate where the failure needs to be identified. So this is the step of looking at for the JE unit where the failure is introduced. And in order to debug, so you can navigate from here, or there is a pre-built QA fix which is mentioned to make it easy. We can click it and we can go to the Azure repos where the code is present. And in this code line, we have the code over here which is written. So instead of the last name, we have mentioned it as last name one, and that was the failure reason for the failure. So we need to correct it to last name, and then we commit the code, and the pipeline will get triggered. So post this change is fixed, the pipeline gets executed, and it is successfully passed as well. So this is how the overall pre-built QA process is set, a pipeline is set, and the different quality gates can be introduced. Looking at the report analysis, so like as I was saying, there are shortcuts which I was created in the landing zone. So we will click on the Sonar Cube, and this is how the Sonar Cube report will look like. So if there are any issues or vulnerabilities which has been identified, or code smell issues, that will get identified here, for which the developer need to fix those code. For the test runs, you can look at in the test plan run section, the JUnit test cases is marked as passed. So all this is happening through automation. There are APIs which are exports through Azure DevOps, and which you can leverage to mark a test case pass or fail as per the execution. This is the build verification test report to verify post the deployment whether the build is properly created. We will execute some of these smoke test cases to verify that the the build is properly built, application functionality is working properly, so that it can be handed over to testing team with the actual services. So I will quickly go to the dashboard. Okay, fine. So I've removed the services. I'll quickly reset it up. My organization, I will set up the personal access token, and I will trigger the landing zone. Okay. Till that is happening, I think this is about the pre-built QA. We will go to post-built QA object, or maybe the best practices of pre-built QA. So some of them we already spoke about, like the objective of the pipeline, where we introduce there should be a static code, code coverage, and unit test to be performed. Then
Chaitanya, I think interest of time we'll move to post-built QA. Okay, so the TikTok we can skip it.
okay, sure, Arul. Okay, so you can offline go through this TikTok section to understand what are the different criteria or best practices to be implemented. Coming to this post-build QA, the objective of post-build QA is to is to perform the smoke testing, to look at the test data provisioning, what the test data is required for testing purpose. Now, when it comes to the smoke and configuration test, it is mostly to ensure that the code which is deployed is or the application is working fine. We will do a litmus test thing, that we execute couple of scripts to ensure before taking or performing the actual detailed execution, to we ensure that the application is performing and we can start performing the test. So that is the objective of post-build QA. In the pipeline, this is how the pipeline looks like. Once the image has been built, it has been pushed, or the image is pulled, since it has been pushed in the pre-built QA, we will pull the image now from the Azure Container Registry. This is now deployed in the Azure Kubernetes cluster, and now we have the other microservices developed. So initially, in the pre-built QA, the testing was performed with the mock services, but now here the actual services are being deployed. It has been connected to the backend, and then we perform the smoke test. Now your smoke test is nothing but some of your hype scripts which will be considered. In this lab, for this lab, we use Selenium for UI testing, and we have the rest assured API for API testing, and the scripts which are written are in the BDD Cucumber style. And then the scripts we maintained in Azure Test Plan post the execution, the test scripts will get updated, the results will get stored in the blob storage, and then the dashboard will get populated. So this is the smallest of the pipeline which we have for post-build QA. And obviously, once this is successful, your smoke test is successful, the quality gate is passed, and then we will actually start with your functional assurance. I'm just quickly checking on the status of okay, fine. So I think it's a failure again. So we'll just go with the playbook today. Okay, so this is the overall pipeline for post-build QA. The pipeline creation over here for post-build QA is again on the similar lines. We have the basically the command which we have created, and that command which will be need to be executed, and post that the post-build QA pipeline will get triggered and okay, so, yeah. So the post-build QA pipeline will get triggered. It will deploy in the test environment once the smoke test is passed. This is how the overall pipeline looks like. What I will do is already the existing project, I will just go to the pipelines. We have the different pipelines which are present. This is the post-build pipeline which was executed. And if you look at the post-build pipeline, you can further drill down into the different stages which has happened. So deployment into Azure Kubernetes services, then deploy it in the test environment. There are further if you want to drill down like what are the details present, you can just click on this and it further takes you to the different steps which are performed, or the steps which are performed under deployment. So the smoke test, how it has been executed. Okay, so this is about the pipeline for the post-build QA. Over here, there is no defect introduced, so it's a smooth execution. And secondly, if you want to access the digital Shopify application, you can access it from deployment in the pre-build QA. Meanwhile, I will just take one more try here. Okay, fine. Okay, so we have seen the post-build QA pipeline. Now what we will do is we will go to the test report analysis section. So to access the report, you can click on the smoke test from the dashboard, and the report, the overall report, you can look at it. How many test cases were executed, how many test cases passed, failed, status. In this scenario, all the test cases are passed. So which means we can get started with the functional testing. We will look at a few of the enablers for this, like you can have like for initial testing, which we mentioned, use of the service virtualization. For considering the complex application, you will need some test data to be used. So provisioning of the test data, these are the two key factors which one can consider so that the testing can be faster, the defects can be identified early and shared with the development team for quick fixes. So let us quickly see from the TikTok perspective. This is the same thing, service virtualization, which can be leveraged, self-healing, automatic virtualization of the services which are not available, then having services virtual, monitoring, reusability aspect to be looked into, identify the impact analysis if some services are not available or so. And from the test data provisioning perspective, it is to look at the data on demand, what data will be required for testing, move over to UI. Gold copy. So basically taking the like for if there is any particular test data is not available, take the data from the production, then you can customize it so that the security restrictions are not present, or it is not causing any compliance issue, and then those data can be used. So these are the couple of best practices which you can look at in terms of the virtualization and the test data management perspective. The functional assurance part, like it is the key factor from or one of the key stage in the entire SDLC, where we validate the functionality of the application, and where we can perform different types of testing. One is your API testing to identify defects earlier in the life cycle. Second is the UI testing, which we perform from the more from the business scenario perspective to perform the steps how end user will perform. Third is if there is a if the application is enabled for mobile testing, perform the testing on the handheld devices for the functional verification, usability, consistency of the application. Then you depending upon what methodology of follow the in sprint testing, perform the regression testing if it is an existing application and there are enhancements which are working on, perform the regression testing once you get the newer code as well. And the benefit obviously are using these practices is that you find a defect earlier. If it is API testing, the maintenance of those scripts are very less. It doesn't depend upon UI. Using the UI and API testing, it is more to showcase all the channels which are available. For example, mobile testing, or if it is a responsive web application, to you can use the same script with a few customization to validate on a desktop browser or come your mobile browser as well. Similarly, the other benefits which can be earned is execution in the mobile device labs. Using the in sprint testing, it will free some time for to perform the exploratory testing, and then the critical functional testing to be performed, so that it gives you error free testing and builds the confidence in the application. So this is the objective of to be performed or of the functional testing. Now, coming to the pipeline overview section, what we are doing over here in this particular stage is that the Azure repos where the final the code is present, and which we will push it into ACR repository, the Dockerized image, and that Dockerized image is pulled and deployed into a test environment. Once this the application is deployed, you have your automation scripts as well maintained in Azure repos. We will build the Dockerized images of these tests, okay, push this into Azure Container Repository, and from there these tests are pulled and used for execution. Now those Dockerized images which we have created, those are created for your UI test, API test, and responsive web test. Now this all these scripts, what we are doing is we are executing using the Selenium grid for parallel execution, and we are using the Azure Kubernetes services. In this scenario, since there are limitations which are being provided for your the trial accounts, we are hosting or executing it using the self-hosted agent. It is another way of execution in Azure, which we are doing. And secondly, all those execution reports are maintained under Azure Test Plan, and the reports and plus the test cases which are maintained are updated post the execution, and that has been stored. The results are stored in the blob storage as well, and then you can access it through Azure dashboard. So this is the quick look. What I can do is I can go to the old report, and where we can look at the how the test plan looks like. Okay, so these are the different test suites which we have. I will just quickly go to the test plan. Okay, see in the test plan, okay, see these are the different placeholders which are created for UI test, API test, UI responsive web test, smoke test, performance test, and security and accessibility. So unit testing test, which we performed in the pre-built QA, you can see that there are 3 different scripts which are added and it has been passed. Similarly, post deployment or execution of your functional test cases, you can also look at how the report or the test can be look like. So the test, you can see the test has been passed, marked as passed post the execution, and then you have this login test as well, which is can be there are different steps which has been marked. There are different charts as well which can be pulled out over here. Over here you can see there is a quick summary as well, 100% run, pass, and you can click on view report as well. Okay, I just click on the view report and it brings you to Azure standard reporting as well. So if you don't want to use the other open source tooling, you can also use the reporting mechanism which is being provided by Azure. Okay, okay, fine. Figure this again. Your last try. Okay, so this is the test plan. Now we'll go to the playbook, and that this is what basically I showed you on the screen in the existing part. Now looking at the pipeline creation and execution. So similarly, the command which is present, you can copy and paste it. This will help you to execute the command in the pipeline. So what we will do is we will quickly go to the old report and see the pipeline. If you look at the pipeline, we have one section as a pipeline and second is the release. The pipeline is mostly as per the best practices by Microsoft. The initial stages which are present in the SDLC, where the development teams has been involved, creation of build with maybe with the mock services or creating a final build. And they will be using the pipelines to perform that. So over here in this, if you look at the functional pipeline, this is mostly our the automation scripts pipeline which we are creating. But anything to be deployed in the higher environment, when I say higher environment, it is basically your test environment. It should go to the release pipeline. Okay, so once this code is finalized, your automation scripts Dockerized image has been built and pushed to ACR, we come to the release pipeline where the actual testing has been performed. So right now, if you look at it, you have two different stages over here. One is the experience assurance, which will come later post the functional assurance. So in the functional assurance, if you look, if you see, we have executed the test 2 times. There is a reason behind it, because in the earlier release 1, what has happened is there was a failure which was found in UI test. Okay, and that is where the whole pipeline was failed, though your API testing and responsive web tests were passed. But since there was an issue with your UI test, again, as you already know, there are two possibilities of failure when it comes to automation scripts. One is the failure due to the application issue, and second is the issue or this defect possibility into your automation script. Okay, so so we need to investigate why this is the failure, which we go to the playbook and identify it in the debugging and re-execution section. Okay, so if you click on the logs, you will see the detailed log where there has been failure introduced, why it has been failure, identify those issue, and then you can navigate to the failure fixes under here, the functional QA fix. Okay, now what we will do is okay, so let me see if I can. Okay, since the fix is already been done, I will not be able to showcase it here, but what we had done was in the failure part, that there was code issue which was present. Okay, and or rather it was intentionally we introduced to highlight it as an incorrect password. Okay, so what we do is in the next step is okay, now we understood what is the issue, so we will uncomment. We have given a fix over there only, so we just correct the line which needs to be there, and post that we will commit the code and the pipeline gets executed. And that is how your second pipelines look like over here. Like instead of release 1, we will go to the release 2 now, and you will look you will see post that correction, your pipeline is 100% passed. Okay, and again, so you can click on this to identify the detailed or detailed steps what has happened in the background. You can go to the test as well to see which test has been passed. Okay, it is taking little bit time. Okay, so this is the report which by default Microsoft provides. There is a filter over here. You can select all these tests so that you can look at the detailed holistic status of your test which has been passed. If there was a failure, it would have been marked as a failure. Okay, so this is about the functional testing pipeline. Okay, this is how we actually fixed it, and this we simulated all this to give the feeling to the customers or the testers who are new to continuous testing to see if there is a failure, what happens to the pipeline, and secondly, once the all the defects are fixed, there are no failure, then what happens. Okay, so this is about the functional assurance. Now looking at the test report analysis, like as I showed you already, said you click on the UI test, then you go to the test, and then you can see the detailed report part. This same report, you can pull it in your dashboard as well. Now this is again one of the easiest way. If you configure it, you can always like whenever you perform the testing, the report will get updated, and you don't need to worry of pulling out the different reports for at any given point of time. So even if there is a project stakeholder, scrum master who wants to access it, they can just come to this particular reporting part, and they can look at it. Okay, what is the test report? Maybe I'll just use this for reference. So how many tests were there, how many tests has been passed, if were there failure, how many times the cycle the automation scripts were executed, and so on can be identified. Over here you can also give your pipeline view as
Chaitanya,
well.
quick time check. We have 15 more minutes, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Okay, we got quite a few questions.
Okay, sure, Arul. So these are the two releases. You can also showcase which releases is passed, or which releases is or which pipeline has failed, and what stage it has been failed. So this gives a quick nice summary to the project stakeholders or a scrum master if he wants to look at it. Looking at the best practices for TikTok, it's more from the automation perspective, storing your test cases in Git repos, following the code practices. Then if you're performing microservice testing, use packed framework to perform the contract testing, and so on. So similarly for UI level testing, have a lean UI test. There should be a proper identification of your objects, and so and then there can be health checkup scripts which can be done before you actually do a detailed execution. Then self-healing in case there are if UI changes, you can still if you want to continue a script of execution, you should look at the self-healing aspect as well. What I will do is I'll just quickly check where we are with the earlier execution. Okay, these test cases are still getting created, so we'll leave it as it is now. And we will go to now experience assurance. In the experience assurance, the objective is obviously to perform the non-functional testing. And in the non-functional testing, you have your performance test, accessibility test, and security testing. In performance testing, there are various types of tests to validate the latency of a page, to see what happens to the application when there are multiple users or tons of users has been logged in. How does the applications behave? Then in terms of the accessibility testing for the individuals with disabilities, how there are various compliance which has been introduced at different regions, how your application can be compliant to those restrictions or features to be enabled, right? So those can be also performed through accessibility testing. And the last not but the least, which is the important in terms of the security, is identifying the vulnerabilities or threat in the application. Okay, like for example, if to identify if there are passwords been openly shared or not, to ensure that it has been encrypted and then it has been shared across the application. So those kind of majors, those are just a smaller or fewer examples in terms of security, which we should ensure as a part of the quality gatekeepers. We need to ensure that whether it is a functional or whether it is non-functional testing, the application is absolutely of quality and which has no any or almost zero errors present. And how we can ensure is through this different best practices and different testing which we perform. Now quickly, let's have a look at the pipeline overview. So similarly for experience assurance, in the Azure repos, we have maintained different repositories for your security test, accessibility test, and performance test. All this, we have created a placeholder in test plan. It gets stored, the results after post execution get stored into blob storage and then updated into Azure dashboard. So the test plan integration is nothing but to look at the how we can store the test cases. So we'll quickly go to the project, and in the project, the test plan, you can see the different test suites. So now we were at the UI test. Now we will go and look at the performance and security test. So we have this performance scripts created using JMeter. Those been mentioned here, what type of testing we are performing. There are test steps which are available. And then you can also look at the accessibility testing as well. Sorry, I'm into charts, so that is the reason it was not showcasing. So this is the test which has been present for accessibility. Similarly for performance as well, it will be there, and your security test as well. So I'll just quickly go to performance test. Okay, so that we just perform the test using 20 users, and then we can have a look at the report as well. But okay, let's complete this reporting part, and this is how the report looks like for performance test. Okay, but even before going to report, we will look at the pipeline part for the performance test. This part. Okay, so we spoke about this pipeline creation. Okay, now we'll sorry. So this is the pipeline. So what I will do is I'll just go to the quickly to the pipeline, release pipeline, and show you the experience assurance pipeline. In experience assurance pipeline, this is how the pipeline looks like. Release one. And release one pipeline, if you look at it, we have this two tests which has been executed in parallel. So you have security test and security test and accessibility test, which can go in parallel. But for performance, once you have all this issue, any issues which has been identified, fixed, then you can go ahead with the performance test. So in accessibility testing, you see that the test cases has been marked as failed. So that is the reason the performance test was not progressed. But in other case, if it was passed, then the performance test would have been executed as well. Looks like maybe I might not have the past result, but that's okay. Let me see if we have the overall end-to-end pipeline as well. Okay. Okay, so pipeline creation. So that is how this is how the pipeline looks like. Okay, and what we have done is we have introduced a failure at security. Okay, and that is the reason of causing the failure in the experience lab for security. And in order to look at this failure, what we need to do is basically come to the debugging and re-execution section, and we will identify why the script has been failed. It is because of the vulnerability been identified. So now how to fix that defect? Now this is not the actual fix, since we had simulated this error. So what we are doing is we are going to the experience QA fix. Okay, what we had done was instead of warning, we had marked it as fail. Okay, and that was the reason of the script getting failed. But now what we have done is we have changed the failure to warn. So it will just show as a warning, but however, the script will get passed. And once we make this change, we will just update it, and then the experience assurance pipeline gets triggered. And once the pipeline is triggered, you will see all these stages has been passed. You will see the scripts has been also identified as passed. Okay. The other thing which I've not spoken over here, the defects which has been identified, whether it is for pre-built QA or maybe a functional assurance or security, right? So what happens? What we do when we find a defect? Right? So we will log a defect under a defect tab. Basically, if it is a quality center, there will be a separate defect tab. But over here, since it is an Azure DevOps world and we work into in sprint automation, so the defect needs to be logged into work items. Okay, so if we would have done this, if this was a successful, we could have shown you how to trigger the okay, now this landing zone is proper. I will just quickly run maybe a end-to-end pipeline just to showcase how an end-to-end pipeline looks like. Okay, so coming back to this playbook, so in the work items, basically we will create the defect, and then that defect will be assigned to the developer who has been worked on it. And once that defect is been worked upon, he will mark it as ready for testing. And once the testing, the scripts is been passed here during the execution, it will also update the defect in the work items. So that is how through the the APIs which are open, you can maintain the test plan, test scripts over here, and also you can create and log defects. So this is about the experience lab. Overall, the reports, you can see the reports over here, how the reports can be looked at from the stages perspective. Sorry, I went to the end-to-end assurance over here. So these are the different reports one can access through the shortcut: security, accessibility, and performance. So for example, this is an accessibility report which you can look at it. If there are any issues which has been identified, that will get identified. Warnings will be present for accessibility. Similarly, for your performance report will be shown. This is a detailed report which you can see. And finally, you can look at the statistics as well from the time perspective, the responsive time. And then we use the ZAP tool for the security testing, and that reporting tool reporting also can be published under the reports section. So this was about experience assurance, and the final stage is the end-to-end assurance. So in the end-to-end assurance, basically, if everything works properly, what the customer's vision is to move the application to the next environment. So if your pre-built is passed, it will go to the post-built QA. Okay, post-built QA smoke test passes, it goes to functional assurance, all tests passed, even experience assurance is passed. The application should be deployed into production. So that is the vision which customer carries, but there is still a way to go. But right now, this is how we have established the end-to-end pipeline. You can use this command to execute it, and the overall end-to-end pipeline will look like this. Okay, so deployment gets successful, you have your smoke test. Then once the smoke test is successful, you trigger this 3 tests in parallel. All this test is passed, then you execute your security and accessibility test. And once this 2 test passes, you go to the performance test, where again, if it is passed, it can go to the higher environment, maybe a UAT, or post UAT, it can go to the production environment as well. So this is how overall looks like, more from the continuous testing in Azure. And these are some of the reports which we have already went through, but this is more from the end-to-end stage perspective. Coming to the accelerator part, basically these are like how we can accelerate our testing. So you can use AI driven QA over here to automate the quality gates, predict the root cause, leverage pre-cognitive monitoring. So some of the features which can be considered in the advanced stages once you set up your pipeline, like how we can optimize your efforts in terms of testing. Coming to the best practices by TikTok. Okay, so this is the journey, how it looks like right now. Like we started initially, the first journey started from regression testing. Second generation, it was more of a progression automation, middleware, tool-based design. And then third one is where like mostly your test data is also automated, service virtualization, scriptless automation, and your behavior-driven automation journey starts. And then now it's a cloud era where we look at the continuous testing, having digital devices automation, omni-channel assurance, and then finally the final stage, or maybe next generation, it is where we use zero touch QA or AI machine learning. So this is all what we wanted to cover in terms of the continuous testing. Yeah, Arul.
Yeah. Thank you, Chaitanya. I think we are almost done. We are coming to the summary, right? Let's go
Yeah.
into the summary part. I'll cover the summary part, right? So basically what we have shown is taking a sample application uh, and deploying that, building a complete landing zone with all the tools that are required for testing and the for the servers that are required to deploy the application, right? All of those are built using the landing zone. And then we have broken the entire pipeline into various stages, logical steps, like pre-build is basically a developer test, and then post-build is a sanity test, and then your functional, and then non-functional, right? The experience assurance, each of those stages. And finally, all of those are shown in one stage, right? If there's a happy path, the end-to-end QA doesn't moderator. And we
Sorry, Arul, your voice is
Arul, I
breaking.
think your voice is breaking, so maybe you would like to uh, stop your video sharing.
yeah.
Yes. We
Not
can.
yet, Arul.
So
No.
Chaitanya, maybe you would like to take it over till the time Arul fixes the issue of his end.
Is it better now? I took off my
Yes,
Yeah,
Arul.
it's
video.
better. Yeah, it's better. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So from a overall recap standpoint, that's what we have done so far. Unfortunately, we cannot. We wanted to actually make it as a hands-on session, but from a outside industry standpoint, we didn't get our security approvals from Cognizant to publish it as an hands-on session. So that's why we did it more of a show and tell. Hope you had a more informative session. We also have some references. If you click on the references link, you will see some of the videos from our experts. What Chaitanya showed today, the same thing has been showed in a series of video sessions for each of the stages. This link we can probably definitely publish it, but you cannot execute any of those because it's Cognizant IP. We have restricted it from an execution standpoint, but from a content standpoint, you can definitely reference it and try to play around Azure and see how it works for you. Right? And more importantly, at the last stage of the cleanup, you need to, as and when you work on Azure or any hyperscaler, you have to clean up whatever you are building it. Okay, so in fact, for the experience labs standpoint, we have actually created one command that actually cleans up the entire assets that we create. But if you are doing it manually, you have to ensure that you clean it up because it will be charged for every minute that you kept it open, right, on the services. With that, I'll stop here. We'll go to the questions. So Patel, you were showing some questions on the chat. Are those the questions that we need to go through now?
Yes, sure, Arul. Yeah, there are a few questions from my end, but it was an amazing session, first of all. And then we really experienced the experience lab. That's what I can summarize it, right? So maybe we can take these questions and then you can cover the rest of the things wherever folks feel that there are few concerns which you can address. So the first question is how easy, challenging it is to migrate the existing complex project to such kind of setup in Azure.
Yeah, it is not about easiness. So Azure definitely provides a lot of capabilities when it comes to its platform. And Azure DevOps is very unique. Okay, so we have built the same experience lab with AWS and the GCP. We have demonstrated because we have customers across the hyperscalers. One of the sessions that we have at the end of the day, the last session for track 2 is on the same topic on AWS. So people who are interested in this topic, you learn something, you can come and see what we have done on AWS, right? So coming to the question on migrating existing complex project, see, migration of an application is a different story, right? When it comes to migration, there are assets. I mean, there are tools and techniques that are provided to the infrastructure developers to build the infrastructure and then migrate those assets into whether it could be a infra as a service where you actually migrate a server, a VM server into Azure, right? Which was an on-premise VM. Now it is an Azure VM. So those migration are pretty straightforward. Nowadays, it is becoming more and more mature. The migration process is more mature. But the real challenge is how do you test it, right? That is where the real difference comes in picture. How do you ensure that the migration works seamlessly? And that's where we have built this continuous testing on Azure DevOps. So most of the problem with that we see is customers migrate their application, but when it comes to testing infrastructure and the testing tools, they still use the on-premise tools. Okay, that is not making sense, right? Or maybe that is the area that we felt the customers have to move forward, and this particular topic is to help customers to move forward in that area, right? And you can do that with a lot of automation, infrastructure automation, pipeline as a code automation, test automation, NFT. All of these can be seamlessly automated using Azure's APIs and the open source tools integrations, and then you can actually completely run. Once the application is migrated, you can ensure the test is also migrated into the cloud and you are able to execute it. So that's how I would call it, Patel. The challenge wise, of course, there'll be a lot of learning because many customers are, I mean, many of us are still new to cloud, right? We are QA folks thinking once applications migrated to cloud, I'll still do the same functional testing. So we have techniques and we have proved through this experience lab that you can do a lot of automation and your application, I mean, testing on the cloud is very different when it comes to testing on premise. And that is how we can help our industry to move forward to cloud adoption in QA.
Yeah, true, true. I agree with you on that, especially when we move from on-premise to cloud setup. There are always challenges. The next question is from Anubha. So she's asking what is the licensing cost for this tool? I don't know whether she's talking about the licensing of this tool for your customers or she's talking about the licensing cost of Azure. But I think the second thing clarifies that. I understand that it is way too high and hence there are still limitations to use this tool for POC. Maybe she's talking about the Azure cost.
Yeah. So Azure DevOps has its own cost, and the Azure portal, what Chaitanya actually showed two different things, right? One is the Azure DevOps, which is like equivalent to your quality center plus Jenkins, all of these bundled into one platform. Now, Azure portal is where the infrastructure as a service has been used, consumed from the Azure cloud. So both are priced. Azure DevOps is priced based on the number of users that you consume. There is a free tier that comes with the basic plan. That's what we have used for our building our experience lab. And if the customer is willing to use Azure DevOps, many of the customers are moving towards Azure DevOps, right? Because that gives a holistic testing and developer and project management capability. Okay, so even customers using AWS as their cloud platform, they go for Azure DevOps for their overall software engineering process. So it comes with the cost, but I would say you can try it free using the basic plan. And then when it comes to Azure on the Azure infrastructure, the Azure portal, whatever Chaitanya showed in the image, right? You can use a pricing calculator to see how much is the cost for a VM for a month, right? But ideally, if you are trying to explore, don't go for a month. You should be using the free tier. You have to subscribe with the free tier, and you'll get around $200 credit, and that is good enough for you to try the Azure infrastructure. Okay. So I would say if in order to do this entire experience lab, it will cost probably $5 to $10 max. If you left it open, it will cost you thousands. So you have to clean it up right after the experience lab. Okay, so that's the most important point. You have to clean up. If you build a VM, you have to delete it right after your experimentation. If you leave it, you will get a charge on your credit card. Okay.
Yeah, and then maybe you would like to share something on the cost which probably a potential customer has to incur if they would like to make use of this experience lab from Cognizant. Has it
Yeah,
decided
so
or?
that is part of our services. We don't charge specifically for the experience lab. It is part of our services as a value add that we provide, and we enable our customers also.
Okay, yeah. So it's nothing but an engagement and alignment process which you take
or
care
managed
once
services, especially
customer.
wherever we do managed services. This is how we become super productive. Secret.
Yeah, sure. I can see the Azure price calculator link which is shared by the Chaitanya in the chat conversation. So all good. Maybe anyone else has any questions, or I can ask a couple of questions which I have posted in the chat. Anyone else has any questions? Maybe you can raise your hand so that I can ask you to unmute. Okay, if not, then probably I can ask you a couple of questions which I have posted in there. The first question I think you have already answered, that you have tried with AWS. But then any specific reason, like why not GCP or Alibaba, and why Azure and AWS?
Yeah. I mean, as I said, each hyperscaler has their own story, unique differentiators. That's why customers go for Azure. The key differentiator when it comes to continuous testing is across all the three. Azure has the most mature capability. Azure DevOps is the strong capability that brings the boards, the planning. You can ignore any of these Jira, Zephyr, Quality Center, and then what not, right? All your project management, test management tools can be right away ignored, and everything can be done in one seamless fashion. Jenkins, right? All of these can be taken out, and Azure DevOps is a single platform to support all of these. GitLab, right? So I think Azure clearly has an advantage, but of course each of other platforms also have their own advantages, which we'll talk in the next track on AWS advantage. But
Sure. Maybe one last question before we jump to the next one. I think you have covered the security testing and performance testing, but what about the compatibility, not only with these tools, but any customer specific customization based tools?
Yeah, so that is all doable. So what we have built is a reference architecture for a new customer who wants to just take it and adopt it, right? But if there is a customer with their own set of tools that they want to integrate, instead of Selenium, they want to use Tosca. They want to integrate the Tosca in the functional assurance. It is doable. As I said, these are all done through API integrations, and we use that as a professional services and make those enhancements before we launch it. It is part of the discovery and implementation phase of the lab for the customers. So ideally, whether so some customers will use, instead of JMeter, they might be using Neoload. You can still integrate it into the pipeline. It's a plug and play concept that we have built into the code, where we can remove one engine and add another engine. That is possible.
Good. So it is tool agnostic lab.
Yes.
Put it like this. Okay, one last question then. What about robustness and maintainability? If something fails, then whether your lab or the platform itself is in a position to auto heal itself, or someone needs to take care of failures.
Yeah, I mean, the auto healing part is all. So there are two aspects to auto healing, right? One is your scripts fail, and you have auto healing capability to heal your scripts. That should be part of your script repository. So whether I'm using Selenium or Tosca, whether I have auto healing capability of my automation assets, that is outside the lab's premise. That is part of the automation team's work to bring that capability into their automation scripts. This lab is what is the area where the lab is helping is the entire DevOps process. The entire continuous testing process is being automated and given as a template reference architecture for usage. In that aspect, we don't have any auto healing capability, but we should have a platform. I mean, we call it as a continuous testing architect who should be part of this program, who will be owning this entire code base for the continuous testing lab, and he will be providing the support to the application teams or project teams. If there are any issues, he will rectify it. That's how it is as of now. But Azure has capability to bring in AI/ML into the reference architecture, which we are working as our future, I mean, next release of the lab, where certain aspects of it can be auto healed, certain aspects on cost monitoring can be brought in. Those items we are working on it. But as of now, it is aligned with the platform admin or owner who actually has to own this Azure DevOps platform and help the project teams to rectify any issues.
Absolutely. Any tool, any such platform, yeah, it needs to start somewhere, and then it's like a stepping stone where you take an incremental and iterative approach of
Exactly.
adding few more functionalities here and there. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that. You have some baseline, and then based upon customer feedbacks, also you will be improving on few things here and there.
Exactly. Yeah.
So auto healing may be one thing which I personally would like to see in your lab, experimentation lab.
Next year we'll show the version 2.
Sure. We have got another topic for ATGTR 2020.
No, next year. I mean, I'm saying next year we'll do a version 2 of Azure with auto healing capabilities.
Yeah. That's why I said, like, you would like to present it, then we will get another topic in ATGTR 2022. Good.
Sure.
So with this, I think by looking at the time, we are almost on the time to jump on to the next session. I would like to give a big thanks to both of you, Arul as well as Chaitanya, for being with us today and sharing what you have experimented and implemented so far through your experimentation lab at Cognizant. I think by looking at the chat messages, conversations, we can see that yeah, the platform has got its power, and then probably it needs to be explored by the end users, and then hopefully it will be a huge success for all of you, so that the efforts will get their advantage. Thank you for being with us today, Arul and Chaitanya. Thank you.
Thank you, Patil, and thanks everyone for staying patiently with us. Hope you all enjoy the session and wish you all the very best. Thanks to ATGR team for the entire conference. It has been really fantastic so far. Thank you.
Thank you.